There are some really cool things to talk about in this, again, iconic solo from the Schubert E-flat trio. One of them has to do with hypermeter, and you may have heard me talk about this before if you've watched other excerpts. It's exceedingly important in the case of this excerpt because Schubert intentionally breaks the hypermeter to insert a very bizarre, otherworldly interjection. And if you don't study hypermeter, you might miss that, or you might have the instincts that it's happening but not really understand what he did. So the original melody that Schubert composed was actually right? So these two bars are missing in the original melody, and then he inserts them, and so they have to sound like they're from a different planet. It's really, really bizarre. So when we get to those bars, one of the most important things for us is to make it sound suddenly like it doesn't belong. And then we're back in the actual melody. So I do want to quickly go over the hypermeter of this melody because it's very important. And if you hadn't discovered this in another excerpt, hopefully this will be the beginning of your hypermeter journey. But in this case, again, the hypermeter is in 4, and 1 and 3 are stronger in some dimension than 2 and 4. So at the smallest size, that would look like this. Is more correct than right? So bigger than that now. Is more correct than bigger than that. Is more correct than at the biggest size of the melody, it's hard to sing that fast, but I'm doing that fast so you can keep track of where we are. Unfortunately, in fingering, sometimes some cellists will accidentally make a mistake here in the hypermeter. And it's when they go, it depends. On your cello, maybe it's not a problem, but keep an ear out for this. I don't like hearing the reason is that if a singer were to do this, going dark to light like that, again, they would be singing I'm exaggerating, right? But it's a little distracting to me to hear that change unless you really, really back away from the cello sound. So you may have noticed I prefer the fingering so that the basic sound is still on the D string. You have one note that's so much higher, it doesn't really matter that it's not on the D string. And then the second time I go up for color. But be very wary not to make mistakes on hypermeter in this melody. And the character is also quite tricky to get because it's a little bit of a march, but it can't be too slow, too fast. It has to feel right for you, and there's a big spectrum of what can work. One thing I also really want to call your attention to, and again, it has to do with singing and taking everything technically back to the idea of what does your voice sound like in your head, or what would a great singer do? Great singers control their articulation with a lot of variety. And I find that often string players don't have enough variety in the way that they change the bow or articulate. And a great example is in the second part of this, we have this moment, and there should be really 3 different articulations on those 3 Cs. The first one is like a ko, and then the second one is a gap, so lift. The third one is no lift, no gap, but a density change. So if I try to make that really obvious, the first one is a click, slightly lift. No space and a change in density. What you'll more often hear from most people is something like this. Where the articulations are all the same and they're really more an outgrowth of some physical habit than they are a control of what you want to hear. So you could make different choices than I made in terms of how to articulate those Cs, but they should be purposeful and probably different from one another to get enough variety for that moment to really shine. So this is an example of a tempting way to play this melody, but that is actually breaking the traditional hypermeter, and therefore I would not, in my philosophy, recommend. It's going to take advantage of this beautiful new harmony when he goes to this lighter harmony, which is indeed very beautiful, and it's a lift. But if you actually play it literally stronger, it breaks the hypermeter. And so this is what that would sound like. So the question I truly do enjoy asking at this point is, how can I make harmonies come alive and have these beautiful changes in temperature and sound and density without actually going in direct violation of the hypermeter? Because the hypermeter is something that is there whether you like to believe in it or not. It is there as much as harmony is there, as much as, intonation and those things are. It's a big part of understanding how this music works. But don't think of it like a prison. Think of it like a question. How do I make this harmony come alive without going against the hypermeter?